Hi, guys. Welcome to another edition of Chats from the Blog Cabin. Today, it's a very special edition because I'm joined by two very special people, and we're going to be talking about voting. We're not going to necessarily get into the political candidates because I think everybody has like political ads coming out of their ears right now, and they really don't want to focus on that. But we want to talk about the importance of voting. So, girls, introduce yourself.
I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm like, do you want me to go first? My name is Andrea, and I am a lot of things. I am a blogger. I blog at Good Girl Gone Redneck, kind of sporadically right now. But I am also a licensed clinical social worker, which is really where most of my time is spent during the pandemic, is being a therapist to all the people. And I'm excited to be here.
Hi, my name is Rada, and I'm also a kind of blogger. I haven't blogged in a while either, but I'm with Simply Southern Girl Charm. My day job, or how I pay my bills, I do PR, public relations, marketing, and I have an event planning company. And I am also excited to be here as well.
Yeah, I will say that when I put out in a group, I said, hey, anybody want to come on and voting? Kate actually volunteered you, Andrea.
She did.
She's like, she works the phone banks. And talk to you. But I'm so glad that you said yes, because I know normally you're like, once you get off the Zoom calls and the therapist, you really don't like to get on. So I really appreciate it.
And I don't mind it, but I was like, oh no, I'm like, when and what and all those things. So my head was in a million places, but I'm thrilled to make it.
I was telling Rada before we hopped on that the reason why I wanted to do this is because last week I took Gracie, my youngest, to vote for her very first time. And I was so excited. And I was telling all these people that she was voting for the first time. This was something I did with Michaela when she voted. But when we got in the car, she was like, I don't know why it even mattered I voted, because my vote's not going to count. It's the Electoral College is not, that's who decides who the president is. So I know there's a lot of people out there that think the same thing. So why should we vote? Why?
That's a really good question. Well, for me, part of there's so many reasons, obviously, as to why you vote, and there's, I know we'll talk a little bit more. The Electoral College, every time there's an election, everyone's like, is there a point to this? Should we still have it? Should we not still have it? All that sort of stuff. But I think it's, it's recognizing our right to have our voices heard, and in a totally different way. We can go on social media, we can do everything we want to, and feel like we're talking to a wall in some respects, but then also recognizing that it's not just a right, but it's also something that it took a really long time for women to get, and then for Black women to get, and then for, it just kept going and going. There's so many different things. And it's something that enables us to really be heard, to really take a look at what the candidates have to offer and what they don't, and, and kind of place that there. But I can definitely understand. I know that feeling is, we start to think about it. I hear so many people say it. And it's just so hard because you want to try and say, well, because of course you're going to vote. Like, of course you have to. But that question is so, so common.
Yeah. And Rada, you were actually mentioning before we came on about the Electoral College. You want to talk more about that?
Yeah. So again, to answer the bigger question, which is yes, please vote. Absolutely vote. Even in the way where you're like, I'm only one person, that one person, just imagine if 10,000 people felt the same way, the impact that those individualized voices, when they come together, it's a big number. So, we still need to vote, and voting actually is our ability and our right to incite change. So if we want to see the change in the way that things are being done, even through the Electoral College, vote. And then we need to get behind our state representatives and our local representatives to push for the bigger picture and the bigger change within the Electoral College. But when I was talking earlier with you, Melissa, about the Electoral College, I was like, a lot of people don't realize that, you know, even when it was created and why it was created, it wasn't necessarily for people. It was really about power. And it was really about giving power to people who could go in and basically do what they wanted to do. And so the Electoral College gave them the ability to kind of go, okay, well, we want our candidate in office if there was a majority. And so it was done by states. And so each state got obviously so many counts towards the bigger picture. But a lot of the southern states had slavery. And the question was between free slaves and those still enslaved, how do we count them as people and how do we determine where their power comes? Because obviously enslaved people could not vote. So that's where a lot of the 3/5 rule come in. So when you think about as Black people during that time, they weren't considered a whole person. And so they were given 3/5 of a person. And so that's why some states have the numbers that they have. It's really based on a lot of people in the state who couldn't vote, but they had to be counted to give the power to the state. And that's where that 3/5 rule comes in. So am I a person saying we should change it? Absolutely. But again, we've got to, you know, that's what voting does. Voting puts it and gives us the ability to go, hey, as people, we don't like what's happening and the way that it is affecting us as a whole. And so that's where our voice really gets championed.
So why do you think so many people are scared to vote? Because so many people are like, I don't want to register, because I know one of the things is if you register to vote, you're going to get called for jury duty. That's just a guarantee. And a lot of people don't want to do jury duty. But
I'm a bad person to ask about that because I actually love jury duty. I did it when I lived in New York like a bunch of times, and I've done it here for, you know, I was on a case for like 5 days, and most recently I had to call in, and I was like, oh, I don't have to go in. You know, and if you want to consider it, you'd be like, it's paid time off for a lot of people. But there is that variable of sort of like, I think that, you know, you feel like, I mean, the government already knows, right? They know where you live, they know where you work, you're paying different taxes, all that stuff is there, but they just feel like putting that final thing in place is going to be some sort of a threat to them. And obviously, you know, it is a big thing. Essentially, we're a two-party system, which is also very outdated in a lot of ways. And, you know, however you register, there are concerns about, you know, who's going to call them or who's going to send them stuff or who's going to ask them, you know, what they decided. And so I think the fear is very real. I think a lot of, I think with elderly people, it varies because some of them, if they haven't been voting all along, they're like, nope, not now. Like, you know, it's just going to be all that much worse if I do it now. So that sort of, you know, that fear of kind of giving your information over. But I don't want to be like it's irrational because they already know everything about us, right? Like but it is scary.
So to add to what Andrea was saying, part of it too is there's a subset of people where, because this information is public, and people don't think about this, but you know, there's a group of people who, between domestic violence, because they've seen an increase in domestic violence cases, and I sit on the board for Shining Light in Darkness. I do want to put a plug out for them. But Shining Light in Darkness, you when you're on a board, you become more aware of maybe things you didn't think about. And so that information, when it's public, guess who gets to see where you now live, and you can find this information. And so, you know, there's that subset of why people don't want to vote, because their information is public, but not just because people are necessarily subscribing to a conspiracy theory, but also because there are real concerns. And then there's also, you know, people don't want to talk about this because people, if it doesn't and hasn't happened to you, then you don't think it exists. But there's also voter intimidation. So, you know, right now I can't remember, I saw it in the news because I love current events, but where they were talking about in Florida, this company where the supervisor supported one candidate and basically sent out a letter to all the workers and basically said, if you don't vote for this candidate, there's a possibility that you're going to lose your jobs if this candidate is not put in office. So people felt threatened if they didn't vote, because then the language was, we have a way to find out what your affiliation or party is, which is true, because if you register, this information is public. So that's that, underlying voter intimidation that people still experience today. And so there are a lot of reasons that people don't vote or are scared or are concerned about voting. Plus, standing in line for hours at a time with COVID. So, there's just a lot of reasons as to why people don't. I hope that people will, step outside of that uncomfortable zone, get help where they need it, because again, there are some people who are experiencing a lot of what I'm looking for, kind of like where the assaults, the domestic violence, they're being threatened, and spouses are finding them
to protect.
So, there's a lot that's going into play for a lot of people. And so, I think that, again, change, everything that we're talking about it boils down to why we need to vote, so that we can then start the change that needs to come with why voter information shouldn't be public. And, why when we go to voter polls, there should be no affiliations. We shouldn't be able to intimidate or coerce or encourage people to vote one way or the other at the polls. Leave it behind a certain line. That way people can vote in private and in peace. So there's a lot of things, I think, that kind of go into why it's important to vote.
And it's supposed to be, but there's so much intimidation front and center.
Yes.
I know. I remember when we pulled up, I immediately told Gracie, I'm like, there are going to be people when we're walking up to vote that are going to just keep walking by them. Just keep walking by them. You already know who. We already sat down. We already talked about, what people stood for, what their policies were, and everything. And she already knew president. She's like, I know who I'm voting for because I know I need it.
Does.
I'm just going to let you know. I'm not putting the name out there, but you guys can
she knew what she was doing. That's fine.
But she's like, other people I wasn't sure about. And she was really scared that, she's like, I don't know some of the other people that are on the ballot. The only thing I know is the president and the vice president. So do I just not vote for everybody else? And I was like, well, you have to research them a little bit. Yeah. But if you look at some of the incumbents in our area that were what they stood for when they were in office and what they don't stand for, then that's how you can tell if you need a change, if the effective change is people that are actually working and doing what they're supposed to be doing instead of just getting bank, basically. But talking about all these people that are standing outside the polls and they're accosting you. Here's a sample ballot. Here's this. Here's that. Here's that. I'm like, what? No, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are scared. They don't want that confrontation, especially with COVID. You got to go in. You got to mask up anyways. You've got to hand sanitizers all over the place. And then it's like a little bit at a time. And I think the biggest thing Gracie was disappointed in, even though we got a pen. See, we got a pen.
Oh, did you guys not get a sticker?
But she didn't get a sticker.
Oh.
She wanted her sticker.
Someone is making voted stickers, obviously not official. We'll take a look. We'll see if we can get our sticker. Not official, but I voted sort of kind of thing, my first vote or whatever. And it is, and that intimidation is, like Rada said, it goes so far back, and that's the scary part. But what you're seeing more of on the news are the people that are not even those people. And those people usually just sort of, I smile and nod, and I'm like, no, thank you, I'm good. No, thank you, I'm good. Until you get in there and you're like, okay. But the other people, the people who are, we're not supposed to wear and I know maybe we'll touch on this, but you're not supposed to wear apparel for your candidate. Mm-hmm. And these are people that are standing outside of the lines. They're wearing that and they're being very intimidating. And so for someone that, what if your daughter was going by herself the first time and walked up there and was like, oh, where are these people going? You would get back in your car. You wouldn't want to stand there. And that's one of the hugest parts that, it's so frustrating, and you watch this sort of stuff and I'm like, I want to go there and yell at these people, but they're everywhere at this point. It's really, it's frustrating.
Yeah. There was one instance of somebody actually wore a hat for one of their candidates when they went to vote, and they didn't ask them to take it off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how is that okay?
It's not, but yeah.
And that's again where I think some of the frustration comes for those of us who, we're kind of out here championing and rallying and encouraging people to get out and vote. And then you see something like this happen and there is no accountability. So it kind of undermines the very thing that we're out here encouraging people to do, which is to vote for change. But then when you see someone who obviously these rules are put into place so that people feel safe, and you have someone who can go that far and not be reprimanded, or hey, just take your hat off, or even to just know, don't just take the hat off. Like, we're at a place now where it's kind of like it's a tough one, because again, I've got one side and there's the other side, because we're talking about voter intimidation is one thing, and then there's like voter suppression. So you've got the fact that these are the types of things where there were groups of people, even like we're talking 2020, who have said that they were going to stand outside of polls, they were going to do things without necessarily touching a person, but in hopes of antagonizing or creating an uncomfortable space so that they wouldn't want to stand in line and continue to be there to vote. So not only is there intimidation, but now you're suppressing the vote.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that we all have right now the right to do, is to vote. Like every single, you know what I mean? Like, so to know that people are doing that, so those that are thinking about not voting, that is the reason to go vote, because why are they working so hard to suppress your vote? If your vote didn't matter, if your voice didn't have the power that they say that it doesn't, if what's you not voting? If that's the case, why go so hard to suppress it? Why go so hard to intimidate and put fear in people for that vote? That's the power, because if it didn't matter, they wouldn't be there. Right? If it didn't have the power, they would not go to the lengths that they're going to try to suppress or intimidate or to antagonize, whatever the word is, like they wouldn't do it. So there's the power. And that's why we really have to vote, because right now there are people who understand that if women didn't vote, that's a huge subset. If people of color didn't vote, marginalized communities didn't vote, LGBTQIA plus community didn't vote. In other words, everybody has power. And there are those of us that care even more so. And that's why it's so important. And then I do it because, aside from historical, because there's the historical aspect as to why I vote. It's also for my daughters. I want, like, with you, listen, your daughter voting for the first time. I remember, my parents and seeing them go vote when I was younger. And I remember one election, I don't remember which one it was, but I was ready to go home. I was just ready to go home. I was like, I was so done. And my dad was like, no, we're going to vote. We're going to. So, my mom had snacks in the bag. And so we did that. But I remember seeing, my parents go and vote. And so that was really important to me. And then when I would ask people in my family, some of the older people, that's when really the history lesson gets told, which is for, the Black community in the South, more so really in the South. You could be lynched if you were, seen voting. They'd follow you home and bump your car, you pull over, you're gone. Or if they heard that you were, creating these rides to the polls or anything where they realized that you were going to go and just vote, just put a check mark on a ballot, you could end up losing your entire life. And so again, no matter how hard it gets, no matter how difficult it gets, I will always go vote. And I think that that's, it's not to scare people, or it's not even about, well, it's just more like that's how long we've been dealing with, voter suppression and voter intimidation. It's still happening in 2020, but more people are experiencing it now.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that should tell you why we've got to vote.
I mean, I can't even imagine exercising a God-given right that you're giving being your life in danger. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we can just even launch upon. But I actually saw a poll today or a graphic on Facebook somebody shared, and it was like the age group from 18 to 24, there's like been like 250,000 that have voted.
Yes.
As opposed to the last election when there was only like 20,000. So I was like,
Mhm.
wow, this is just, I wonder if it's because they want to affect change. They want to see, and I was talking to Gracie about it because she's 18, and I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I saw this. And she's like, it's because we want a say in how our country's run now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're now getting their civic duty. So what do you say to the first time voter though?
First of all, yay, go.
Yeah.
Like,
I know.
yay.
It makes me want to be like, the kids are all right.
Yes.
Right? Like they're doing it. Yeah. I mean, I think, it is a huge it's a rite of passage in some ways, like your first experience voting. And I've definitely talked to people who've sort of said, well, I skipped it, or I this or I that, and not even necessarily the last go round. But there's especially the fact that it's a presidential election, I think is really making it even huger because I mean, for the longest time, I didn't, in New York, if you're not affiliated with a party, you can't vote in primaries. At least that's how it used to be. And so, and then when I first registered, I had that sort of fear, like, I don't want anybody, I don't want to pick a party. I don't know what I'm even doing. So, and so primaries were like non-existent. And so you think about at that age, and if kids are in school or whatever they're doing and working, they're not necessarily going to say to themselves, oh, this is something that's big enough for me to take the time to do. So I think the presidential aspect right now is huge, that they do want to be heard. And like Rita said, it really is like, good for you, because you are, and not to sound cliche, but it is your future, like it's our future too, but you've got a lot more of it. And so making that and having your voice be heard. And that's when I hear all that stuff like, oh, the kids, and it's like, no, like, a lot of different ages, and family members that are of that certain age, where suddenly you see them sharing this stuff on like Instagram, and you're like, oh, look at that, like that's my 18-year-old niece, like like, okay, that's something that I might not have even shared, or I wouldn't have even known when I was 18. So I think the pride in that, and like she said, wanting to really make that change, it goes back to, yeah, that's why you vote, is because you are the people who can. We can too, but without you, we probably can't, right? There's not, there's that sort of line where we need everybody, and without it, we fall short, I think. So I think
That
cool.
is so true.
I was gonna say, I definitely think it's more like a, like what Andrea was saying, is like a rite of passage. But the fact that there are so many young voters who are not only registered but actually have voted, that's the key.
Yeah.
So you can be registered, and that's good,
Yeah.
right? Like you get like a gold star for registering.
Yeah.
But to go out and actually vote and to put your voice into play, says, number one, that I think a lot of times with political candidates, so this is not a stab or a jab at anybody right now, but I think one of the things that I've always said, and I pay attention, especially locally, is, how often do they talk to the community? Because I think that what hurts most political candidates, and people wonder oftentimes, like, how come I didn't have more numbers or more? It's because of your engagement. You didn't build a relationship with the people in the community. And I think the thing that a lot of the young voters can teach a lot of the people running for office, or just in general, is that they have a voice. The same way that, and when I do my tangents, the same way that businesses want to talk to millennials, when it comes to business and market to them, it's the same way that I feel like candidates or those in office should also do the same, is to have a conversation around this subset of a group of people who have the ability to sway an entire election. And so, I'm kudos to them for not only, coming out and voting, but also recognizing their superpower with that ability, because they have the chutzpah, if you will, to not only go, hey, we vote, but we want change. And so because of that, I think it's going to make a lot of people who run for office or who are elected into office with this election on the local, state and presidential level to be held more accountable, because I think that they're the ones that will go to social media. They're the ones that will, put a lot of information out. They're the ones that don't mind exposing or saying, okay, we have a candidate here locally. We have two people running and they both have some issues. But it's kind of like when you watch the commercials, it's like they're trying to make it out like, well, he did this, so it's not as bad as the other guy doing this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, they both did things. So, and so I think that that's what's happening now is a lot of that audience, that age group is actually going, yeah, we see it, but here's where we're going to hold you accountable and why, we want our voices heard. And I think that's what's amazing. So, again, kudos and yay. Keep voting.
Yeah. So you hit on something, social media. Because I mean, honestly, I will say I have unfollowed our for 30 days. I'm like, really? I'm just tired of this.
Yeah.
But social media is huge now, now. And
it's beyond huge.
And some people are just like vicious on social media.
So well, you can hide behind the keyboard.
Yeah.
Keyboard warriors. They're out there.
I think that unfortunately, so it's like social media is like this it's like it's bittersweet. It's like you in one instance it's great and it information, but there's so many, like you can literally write a post, put it under one name, put it out tomorrow and call yourself a journalist or call yourself a news put yourself up there with like CNN or Washington Post or whatever. And so people are not fact checking, people are not citing their source. And I think that's another thing for definitely, I'm not going to say age wise, but for those of us that were in school, you had to cite your source. You couldn't just say my grandma said blah blah blah. Like, where'd your grandma get that from? So I think that one of the things about social media and where it hurts us is that a lot of people take information at face value. And they're not really looking at where the information is coming from. They're not fact checking. And, even with people being really set in their candidate and their reasons, one of the things that I've always told people is I don't mind having a conversation if you don't necessarily agree with what I agree, but I need a conversation. You can't spit out the rhetoric of what somebody else has already told you. Those can't be your talking points too. Because then that's where we get lost in translation, because then that just tells me you really don't know what's going on. You're just listening to somebody tell you what you're supposed to say whenever someone says this. So there's not really this conversation that's happening in social media. That's where it falls apart, is because we don't have the face-to-face. I can't just pick up the phone and go, hey, what did you mean earlier? So a lot of people just say things and they're really ugly about it because people are removed from listening. People just want to get their viewpoints out. They feel very strongly about it without even knowing why they feel the way they do. And so social media gives them that platform. There is no checks and balances. By the time you report somebody for something that might be considered hate or whatever, days go by, it's still out there. So there's that. But then the good of it is that there are some of us who've used it as a platform to talk more about topics and to be able to use our voice and why we encourage people in this particular election to vote. Because it's really important. And so social media has given me that opportunity to have more conversations around this election and some subject matter. So bittersweet.
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, I think the subject matter, certainly. I know Facebook has somehow, sort of, I'm not going to say always, but they've got that fact checking thing. But the thing is that quite often you get the person who posted it and then you're like, hey, look, Facebook posted this. Why don't you take a look at it? And they're like, no, and you're sort of like, well, that doesn't, I'm not even trying to go against you. I'm just trying to say, hey, look, that was disproven. And I mean, you both know me well, but obviously I'm very adamant about how I feel about a lot of topics. And I do use Facebook for that. And it's, I think the other part is, I tie that into just who I am as a person, obviously, but I also tie it into the work that I do with clients, because when I'm working with people of all different, going through all different things and recognizing what's coming from other people that are about these are my clients. Nobody knows them. I know them. That's it, period. But nobody knows them. And so, but they'll say something and I'm like, oh my God, that would totally impact this person that I know is struggling with this. And, it's just, I think that it's important that we still utilize social media the way we do, many of us, but it's also scary because, even when, not going one way or the other, but when you're watching the debates and things like that, and people are like, oh my gosh, this or that. And so there's not enough fact checking. So people are like screaming into the abyss, no matter who they are. And so, I know a lot of the news channels are trying now. I laugh because so my undergraduate degree was in journalism. And so it was a whole other, like, I couldn't even imagine going into that field right now because it was just a whole other world. But like when they're doing that sort of fact checking, it's like, okay, good. But then you're like, okay, wait, like who's really paying attention to that? Are they listening to that? Are they not? Like, and no one feels like everyone feels the news is unbiased now and all that. And yeah, there's some that are, and there's some that you really, you want to hear, you want them to be like, here's this fact, here's this truth. And that's sort of where you feel like you're going in circles, I think. So it's tough.
Yeah, I totally agree because honestly, there are so many people that are like, well, if you look at the streamed on the news and if you see them when they're streaming live the debates, you can see all them, they're like coming at each other. They're not even listening to the debate. They're just there to argue with you, with the person that supports the other candidate. That's a different supporter than them. They're not even listening to the debate at all. It's just all in the comments.
Yeah.
So let's talk about political affiliations because like you said, Andrea, when you went to vote, you couldn't vote in the primaries because you didn't want to be affiliated with either political party because you didn't know what either one stood for. So
this was quite some time ago. But I am still, in all honesty, I'm not affiliated. People will be surprised to hear that probably, but I did want to vote in the most recent primary because it was picking a presidential candidate, right? And so I was like, okay, I want to do that. And so in North Carolina, you can, but you have to ask for a Democratic or Republican ballot to do so. So you don't have to declare affiliation, but in New York, you do. So it was like, I didn't know. I was just like your daughter, where it's like, I don't know enough about all these people. And so I was like, maybe I'll pick president, but what if next time I want to vote this way? Or what if the next time? And so when you start off, if you don't know enough, then, because even if I think back to like college, I don't remember being like, oh, this is how we do this. Like, if you pick a party, it doesn't mean you have to always vote that party. Like, I feel like there are so many different assumptions that sort of do that. But yeah, I was always like that same thing. And when you were talking about the people in Florida, where it's sort of like, because you can log in, you can see your own information, you can see affiliated or which party, and you can see which elections you voted in, which is also like the kind of thing. So if those people were like, oh yeah, I voted, and their boss was like, oh no, you didn't. Like, how do you make that happen? How do you make that be something that happens? It's not legal, but if you're the owner of a business and you're enforcing this type of a rule, like how? I don't know. I know I tangented, but the party thing is big.
It is big. And honestly, I don't vote party. I vote who I think is the best person for the job, regardless.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people get stuck that they have to vote either strictly Republican or strictly Democrat, and no varying from that. And I think that's where a lot of the young kids that are coming in and starting to vote are really confused about because they don't know where, like you said, they don't know where they stand at.
Yeah. It's tricky.
So I know both you guys have daughters that will they be able to vote in the next election or no?
Your oldest will, yeah?
Yeah,
mine will not. Took me a minute.
Yeah, my oldest will.
Yeah, because my younger one is my only is your younger.
I was gonna say yes. Your only is my youngest, but my oldest will, and she followed she's followed it very closely. Not that I required her to, but it was exciting to see her take an interest and to hear her take on things, her perspective on things. you know, she paid attention and she was asking questions. And then there were times when, as she's asking questions, she's searching for the answer to see if,
Yeah.
you know, the candidate has talked about said subject. She's very like me. And I said opinions are great. Um, but it's less opinion, it's more like it's a belief system. And so I can always tell people, I can tell you why I believe what I believe. And so it's less of like, well, my opinion is this. It's kind of like you said, when it comes to the party lines, a majority of people, you know, when they affiliate themselves with the party, it's usually, a lot of times it's based on family, because you know your,
Yeah.
how you grow up dictates a lot of your belief system. And then a lot of times when you get out on your own and maybe you experience some things in the world, mostly when you become a little more independent or break free of your parents, you start to then kind of figure out, okay, wait, this party doesn't necessarily align with all of my belief systems, nor does this one. And so, you know, you kind of start to look at it a little more, and that's what you're supposed to do. But there are a lot of people, because um, people get complacent, and complacency is easy. It's very easy to just go, oh, I've been doing this, or this is what my parents did, this is what my grandmother did, without really looking at the big picture. Which, not to go back to another subset of a subject, but that's why things like, right now, when you bring up certain subject matter, people get very, very vocal and
Yeah.
very, very tense. So you are talking about a subject matter that a lot of people have a thought or opinion about, but are not really sure how to either put it into words or to get their point across. Or they come across, because like one of my questions I asked a friend of mine, I was like, how did one party get to be known as the more, you know, Christian party over anyone else? Like, I just was confused. I was like, when that happened?
Yeah.
And even when it did happen, was there like a vote? Did we get to vote that was? Because in my head,
Yeah.
I'm going, I know people on both sides who fit that specific of being, say, a Christian. I'm just example, but you know, in my head, I'm going, how did one party get to be known? And then when you have the names and the different things, and in my head, that's another reason why I think people are not so quick to say where they are, because you get labeled.
Yeah.
And so with
Oh,
these
absolutely.
party lines, it's just it's interesting, because like I said, there are people I think that are just, it's just convenient. You don't have to really do a lot of information. You don't have to do soul searching. You don't have to look up anything. You could just be like, well, this is what I believe, without even knowing what you believe. And so again, when we start holding the politicians accountable, when we start paying attention to the things that they said they were going to do before office, because there was a, again, so that, because I know today we're not talking about one or the other, but there was this issue that came about from a certain celebrity, and he presented this particular plan. And you know, everybody was like, everybody has their thoughts about the plan. And in my head, I was like, so the current administration doesn't have to wait until the next election for the plan, I'm assuming, if that's the case. So the
Yeah.
only people that might have to wait would be if there was a shift in
A
power.
shift in, yeah.
Right. So in my head, again, I'm just going, okay, help make this make sense. And I think that's the thing with these parties. A lot of times
Yeah.
the stuff that they're saying doesn't really make sense. And COVID changed a lot of the ability to have debates, and to really, I think, for them to get into the community and really have more engagement. But the party lines can be, you know, quite divisive, if you
Right.
will, especially even for friendships and families. And so I think a lot of times people always just go, I don't know, not really. And those that are hardcore, um, without really paying attention to the fact that there are some people from both sides who are presenting things that need to be paid attention to, says a lot about us as people. And I don't want to call Americans lazy, but you know, we just,
A lot of us are.
yeah, we just don't really, we
Yeah.
don't dig deep in this because we're not versed in it. And you know, with it, you know, my
Yeah.
grandmother would say, if you don't really know what you're talking about, you know, be quiet for a little bit till you
Yeah.
know a little bit more
Listen and
and
learn.
learn. And I think
Yeah.
it's, people aren't open to that right now. People they want to really, and COVID mentally, and I think Andrea, you can really speak on this. COVID
Yeah.
from a mental standpoint too has gotten to where people just, they're tired. They're just really tired and exhausted. And so, you know, now politicians are across the board seen as just that. And I think that's what the last election was about. People were tired of politicians, so they wanted to bring somebody else in. So there's this, what is the ideal person? And I think really it comes down to pay attention to how these people are in the community. Pay attention to how these people are, who's in their circle. Pay attention to the things that they say publicly. Pay attention to how they show up for the community. Pay attention to the people that they say they're going to help. You can't say one thing and it only fit a portion of an agenda when there's so many other subsets of people who fall under it.
That
If
same
you
thing.
broadened it, you've narrowed it for your agenda or your perspective, and that's not right either. And I think that's where a lot of the political issue comes, is there'll be this here and they say we're this, but then you go, okay, if you say this, then these people fall under this category, but because you don't want to be representative of those people because they're, then you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing about, I think my whole take on this is, a lot of people are not addressing a lot of issues because they don't want to get in the hot seat. And that's what being a politician is,
right?
You sit in the hot seat,
To answer
right?
the
You gotta
question.
deal with the uncomfortable. So I want more people to just be okay. You got to be able to deal with the uncomfortable. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. We have a comment, and I have to show this because it's Kate's. My kids are much more political than I ever was at their age, and they are seriously educated about the election. I'm impressed and proud of them. And honestly, I think it's the younger generations that are going to teach the older generations how to vote and what they should do to change the country. Because you even look at the protests that have happened since the George Floyd incident. They've changed. Things are changing. This country is changing. The dynamic of how people respect each other is changing. And it's not so much. I know in the beginning, there was a lot of really out there racism that were plotted out. But now it's things like people are calling it out now and saying, no, that's racist. You need to stop it right there and there, instead of just letting it go and letting it slide.
It's hard because
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go.
I was gonna say, I'll be quick. No, I think I was gonna say, I just think that when it comes to, this is something that's consistently been something that I've said, that a lot of my friends and family have said, but then that a lot of friends and family have, gone against, where, that one post that everyone posts and says, well, if you vote differently than I do, I'm still going to be your friend, or I'm still going to love you, or I'm still going to whatever. And yes, there is a time for that. And, and yes, maybe for some people now is that time. Maybe that is okay for some people. But when it comes down to racist behaviors and actions, when it comes down to discrimination, when it comes down to things along those lines, then it becomes, it's more of a moral thing. And it's not just, oh, I pick party A or party B. It's how I consider treating people and how these parties consider treating people. And so, it's a little bit different than I think.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like sometimes, and again, we're in an election year, so there's always going to be what's called your token group of people that they're trying to reach. So, for instance, if you're paying attention to the news, women of color are one of the demographics that they're going after. So at the end of the day, when you're thinking along party lines and racism, no party's perfect. So, we sat here and we're going to, we're being honest. And that's the thing about, where we are at this point, is if we're going to have these conversations, they have to be raw. They're not going to feel good. It's literally going to feel like where you get that cut, where you were out working and you get a cut, and at first it didn't hurt, but then you realize, the more that you move and then you sit for a minute and maybe it brushes some salt or something brushes, or your sweat gets in and you're like, oh, it starts to burn. Yeah. So that's what this is. We're at a place now where we've got a cut in America, and it's a really deep gash. It's probably stitches. It's not just a Band-Aid. And where we are, I think we want to put a Band-Aid over racism. We want to put a Band-Aid over dealing with marginalized communities. We want to put a Band-Aid over all of these things that are uncomfortable to talk about. But we're past that. This is a gash. It's a really big, deep gash in America, and it's going to take time to heal. It's not going to be a 2 month, it's not a 3 month, it's not a 3 year. It is inevitably the same amount of time that it took. We go back to, like, voting rights, and like when women were granted the right to vote. That was what, August 18th, 1920. So, you go, yay, women got to vote. No, not all women.
No.
So, even for Native Americans, they were barred from voting up until it was like 1948 or something like that.
Like in our
yeah,
like in our
1950. They were here first.
Yep.
They couldn't vote until like 1950. Most Western states did it, and some Southern states, but still. So, again, you're talking about hundreds of years, generations of a lot of suppression, a lot of microaggressions, a lot of racism, a lot of things that are going to take that same amount of time to kind of fix. And what, again, the younger generation hopefully will do by voting is to incite that change. What comes from us when we're talking about it and we're saying it, is it getting better? To be honest with you, it depends on the day. It depends on who you're talking to and what they've been able to accomplish. Some of us could say, absolutely. There are those that'll say never was a problem. And then there are those that'll say, nope, not really. So I think that's the thing about why voting is so important for all of us, and why we have to get out there, is because there are still some issues that America, because I mean, again, staying on topic with voting, why is there even a Voting Rights Act? And the Voting Rights Act of 1965, again, if we're going to go there, the fact that had to even be implemented and has to constantly be like updated, right? Like, so when you go, are we still making strides? We are, just a little slow. And so, it's getting better to some degree, but I think, we have the ability now to kind of say more, do more, be representative more, like more people in the marginalized communities can be representative of these places and spaces, but we still unfortunately got a long way to go. It's a long haul. It's like brushing your teeth. Do you ever just stop brushing your teeth just because your teeth are clean? No, you do that every single day. I hope. COVID has changed people's habits, but in the same way that you get up and get dressed or put your socks on or shoes on before you leave your house, you don't necessarily explore the world barefooted. It's that if in order for the change to really truly be effective, just like the vote, it's an everyday occurrence. We must do it every single day. You have to implement that change every day. Look at your circle. If your circle isn't representative of the world that you live in or want to live in, change it. You know what I mean? If you go to your job and you only see one person of color at your job, demand change. There's lots of ways that even though we want to put a lot of the responsibility on the politicians, it still falls on us too as citizens. We still have a responsibility beyond just voting. And I think that's the thing. That's why the caregivers and the teachers and the community activists, the people who didn't get voted into the job, but they're out here, they're on the front lines, like Andrea, calling people, encouraging people to vote. I mean, those people have a power and a responsibility, and that's where we are now. We also have to be responsible, not just for ourselves and those that look like us, but as a whole for all of us, for my children, your children, like that's who this is supposed to be for. So we do have a lot that's left to do. And I hope that, each one of us is looking kind of within ourselves to go, what can I do? How can I be a part of the change, positive change, and then to do it?
Honestly, I've been looking at all these different things. I look at political ads, and I like some snooze, some I actually watch because they actually tell you something. They don't try. The biggest turnoff for me is when they try to smear the other candidate. That's what I'm like. But the biggest political ad that always gets me is when they talk about immigrants. Because for people that don't know, my husband is an immigrant from Mexico. He is still not a citizen, so he still can't vote. But he's like, next election, I'm voting. I'm going to be a citizen by the next election, and I'm going to vote. He says, because I need to make the change in this country. But, people marginalize them so much, saying the immigrants are the illegal immigrants. And like, they think they're all these criminals running around. People don't realize how hard it is for people to come into this country, people from poorer countries to come into this country. I mean, my mother-in-law, when she was still alive, tried to come over, and with their visa, they had a visa, they were approved, but because they didn't have a piece of paper from their bank telling them how much money they had in the bank, they were denied entrance into our country. They already had the approved visa, they already had all the paperwork, but because she left that piece of paper at home, she wasn't allowed in.
Mm.
Now, you tell me how many people walk around with their bank statements around.
Right.
How many people from other countries that have tons of money are coming in? It's because they are looked down upon.
Yeah.
And I just look at it and I go, you know, our country is such a mixed race now. And there are so many races that are mixing together. And I absolutely love it. I love it. I mean, you know, I'm a big proponent. I love everybody, you know, and I love the fact they're mixing with each other. I mean, my son-in-law is Asian American. I mean, and he was raised by a Puerto Rican stepdad. So, you know, we got all of it going on. But, you know, I just absolutely love the fact that people are not afraid to mix and to be friends with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that racism is something that definitely needs to be end. And that starts really at the top, because when you see the candidates start saying this is racist, and then it'll trickle down to their core, and then things will change that way. I know I got off on a tangent, but I'm very passionate.
There is a lot. I mean,
No, you unpacked a lot. You unpacked because, you know, when you talk about, you know, immigrants and the fact that people think, and again, when I say people have their opinions, but the fact that you think just building a wall fixes the situation is it's laughable. So we'll just leave that one at that. But as far as, you know, there's the two sides, because, you know, there's an argument of with immigrants coming in and taking the jobs, you know, there's that they take. So I'm always like, what jobs are they taking? Because they're not management jobs. You know, they're not corporate America jobs. A lot of them are migrant workers. A lot of them are doing construction working. And if we're going to be honest, again, it's just my favorite thing, let's just go ahead and just hit that nail, which is if they're working here and they're undocumented, who's hiring the undocumented workers? Because they're getting jobs somewhere. But again, no one wants to talk about that part. Just want to talk about those that come in here, because accountability has to go. Yeah. It's both sides. It's not that they're in here, it's also they're being hired. And so what about the people hiring them? So are they not getting fined? Are they not getting jail time? Because the way that whole thing has to work, again, is we have to look at the whole big picture. The fact that people are escaping to come here, people never want to pay attention to what they're escaping from. Right. What are they running from? What if you're willing to go through all that to come here to feel safe? What are you? There are people who were sending their kids here without. So they're you know, when you say at the end of the day, the fact that they're human and they're just trying to get a better life, and people are like, well, they need to do this, and this. There's only certain people that are being questioned, or certain people that are being held up, or certain people that are criminalized, or certain people, because even when they do it, they're bad people. They're bad, and that's what people are being told. They're bad people. But it's only a certain subset of people. Yes. And so, again, when we have these conversations about us as a country, you know, how is it that one group of people could come in? And it's almost really easy because, again, I did recruiting for a lot of years. So this isn't just coming, you know, off the top of my head. From a recruiting perspective, certain subsets of people got to come in here a whole lot easier on visas than other groups did. Yeah. And the skill sets, they all can offer a skill set. So it's not a matter of one coming in and not offering a skill set. But again, that's other conversation that we've got to have. Again, as country, we've got to hold our politicians and those that hold these places of office and power accountable, which is, in order for that change to be effective, I don't want to live in a country where we turn away a certain subset of people. Because to be honest with you, again, that's a whole nother conversation, but we'll say they're welcome. But, you know, I think that when we're talking about, like you said, welcoming people and wanting to talk about these issues, it does need to be addressed. But I think that people are trying to vilify, and they're trying to make a group of people look like animals, and that they're doing the worst, to the fact that there are children in cages. Like if we're just, again,
Right.
how is that even a thing here?
Yeah.
How is that even a thing? And that, now the number of children that they may never get reunited with their families. So there's so many things that, we have to talk about. And so immigration, to be honest with you, again, if you look at the history of the United States, immigration is what the United States is built off of. That's it. So, we wouldn't be where let me say, I was going to say where we are, but technically that was like not a good, I'm like, is that? But we really,
no, but I mean, the country in and of itself, there's a lot that would not be in place without the immigration history.
Yeah, I think that I don't like you when people vilify a group of people when they haven't even put themselves in the community. If you don't, again, if you're talk, it's kind of like, and I'll use it because it's kind of like when a person goes, I have a black friend, and then they use that and they put that in their social media, like it's a hashtag. That should be a hashtag. I got a black friend.
Yeah.
Or, I have a Jewish friend. I think that post one day, Andrea, when I didn't tag you, but I was like, that would be like me tagging all my Jewish friends. Like, you don't do that. And so I think with immigration, that's what it is. It is the meat and potatoes of America.
And the country.
Like it's, I want everybody. I want people to come here from all over and to bring all the parts of who they are. And I certainly don't want it to be where we're having prejudices or racism against a certain group of people based on where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Yep, that's true. Now we have comment. Kate's commenting again. She has a 3-part comment, so I'm going to get through that one. Yes, my husband is an immigrant. He's fortunate to have a green card, just like mine's fortunate to have one too, but we had to jump through hoops to get it. I'm sure, Kate, you did too. People don't realize how much undocumented immigrants contribute to the economy. $7 billion per year is paid into Social Security from undocumented immigrants, but they are not eligible for benefits. In addition, they spend billions of dollars per year, which supports the U.S. economy and helps us create new jobs. And they take the jobs that America wants. Yes. And they are often treated in the workplace as the low one. I mean, my husband, I'm just going to throw this out there. My husband worked for a corporation, and he was one only Mexican in the whole corporation, but he was the highest earning. He's a mechanic, and he would bring the highest into the company. He left that company 2 years ago, became one of many, and now he's making more money now because his boss man values him as an employee and as a person, as opposed to all that racism that he got in the workplace and the other place. So it just makes a difference. I know we're getting off on a tangent. This is not. Well,
you know what? It all applies.
It's kind of the stuff again when you're talking about who you elect into office, because these are the things that do matter. And so, when you talk about being on the bottom of the totem pole, I mean, again, from a historical aspect, there were times when Black people, the only jobs they could really get were either yard, landscaping, housekeeping. They could only go to school for one of two things most of the time. That was to be a nurse or a school teacher. And even then that came at such a high price, so there's, when you're talking about, a subset of people that come here, really what it boils down to is if you have melanin in your skin, the more melanin you have, the more misery. So let's just, again, I would love to be able to say something different, but when you have melanin in your skin, and the browner you are, the more issues that you have from America, because that's why a lot of times people have to say the things that they say, that I have the Black friend, or I have the Latino friend, or my friend is this, or wait, we do have the one Mexican guy, you know what I mean? People use that that's some sort of a gold sticker moment, and it's really not. And so, again, when I vote, I vote not just for me. I don't vote just for, my community. I vote for marginalized communities as a whole. So when I speak up, I'm not speaking up for just African Americans or Native Americans. I'm speaking up for Americans, especially those that have been marginalized, those that have a subset of people who are saying your way of thinking is not enough, or we don't value who you are because you don't fit this narrative, or like you said, talking about immigrants, and like what Kate mentioned, the thing is, the jobs that they typically have are the jobs that a lot of people don't want. And again, they're not receiving the benefits. That's a lie from some of these commercials. They're not getting these benefits that people think they're taking away from us. They can't necessarily get scholarships to school. Like, you know what I mean? So a lot of times, and they put money back into the community. So, you know, again, when we're talking about this perpetual, without immigrants here, again, we wouldn't be kind of where, like, they've helped build this country too and sustain it. So, you know, voting, again, we go right back to vote for the people that are going to be representative of the America you want to live in. And some people are showing that they're not open to a lot of people being a part of the America that they are trying to support. And so, you know, it's past party lines now. I never really cared if you were a Republican or a Democrat. I didn't care if you were, you know, undecided, independent. But this particular one is a little unnerving because it's beyond party lines. This is a human thing. And, you know, right now, I am paying attention to how some people are speaking out as a whole against a lot of people. And, you know, it's not okay. So vote, keep voting, vote.
So I have to ask you guys a personal question. Why did you personally want to get involved when I popped up in the Facebook group, hey, does anybody want to come on?
Because Kate made me. No.
Kate, if you're still listening.
She knows I love her. No, it was funny because I had seen your post, but I was having like such a work day. And I'm like, and then I said, I saw it. And then I saw she came back and I'm like, you're a sneak. What are you like just saying like what I've been doing? So, you know, part of why I thought it would be a good experience, obviously, is a couple of things with respect to the stuff that I have been doing. She's laughing. With respect to what I have been doing. So what I did over the summer, and a lot of people were doing it, I think through September even, is I did some volunteering with Moms Rising. And if you haven't heard of them, you know, I just did a volunteer thing with them, but I do have friends that work for them. So a little shout out because they are very adamant and very aware and very informative with respect to a lot of political issues. And so I volunteered to do 100 postcards to send out to voters. No affiliation, no, you know, just a, hey, election day is November 3rd. You know, vote early if you can. Make sure you're registered. Just a couple of, you know, sentences here and there. And what was kind of cool is that across like Facebook and Instagram and stuff, I started seeing friends that I had no idea that they even knew about this organization were doing the same thing. And they were doing it for other organizations too, but for Moms Rising as well. And I know there's like Get Out the Vote, like all those different things. And so I figured, you know, I did it the last time as well, not as many, I don't think, but I did it last time too, because literally it was just like, you know, this is a huge election. Your voice deserves to be heard, and, you know, make sure you get out to vote, make sure you're registered, things along those lines. So that was number one. And I have just recently, so I am that person that calls and you're like, click. I just recently did like a training and a shift to do for in Durham County, because that's where I'm located. And there are still shifts and things. But I did some of those calls, and so they set you up and it's automated. And, you know, it's interesting because I did get some people who needed information, honestly. And so that was part of, I was like making notes because I'm like, these are a couple of pieces of information that I want to make sure that I share, kind of thing, you know, because some people are like, well, oh yeah, I'm registered, and you can go online and check and make sure you're registered. And although right now you can't just sort of register online anymore, you can still, this was something I told someone because they were like, I think I'm registered. And I said, well, you can check, but if you're not, because we do early voting here, you can actually register on an early voting day. And a lot of people don't know that. And so it was stuff like that where I was like, just in my little training session alone, which was like, an hour, I learned stuff and I was like, well, if I wasn't registered or if something happened where, I know a lot of people have checked and, people have been talking about this for, I don't even want to say months, maybe even like for a year, like, hey, don't forget, make sure you're registered, make sure. But people, don't necessarily know that part. And so they're kind of like, oh, well, sure I am. And if you go, I don't know if people are going to tell you, right? Like, I don't know if someone's going to say, okay, it's early voting, you can register today because you're not showing up because
Well,
of the suppression and things like that. So tricky.
well, I will say when we took Gracie to vote, when I took Gracie to vote, I said first time voter, and the guy asked her, "Are you registered?" And she had already registered. So, but he did ask. So I will say,
Yeah.
at our polling place, they did ask if.
So
They
and they ask, but the thing is that I don't know if someone says yes, and if they look and the person's not, will they say you can register today, or will it depend? Will they make that choice? Like my goal, my hope, because I've talked to a lot of people who are doing polling places and are doing so to make sure that people are not asked for ID if you don't have to be. Some states do require it, some states don't. It's important to take a look and make sure. I believe we do not, but if you're a first-time voter, they can ask to check the signature, like things like that. And so those little variables that a lot of people don't know, that was kind of why, just the stuff that I had learned about just how you can pop online and track certain things. I was kind of like, it'd be kind of, I mean, I'm very passionate about the election right now anyway, but I was sort of like, these are the things that I can, maybe just bring up enough to mention, or, I think there was one other thing. Yeah, so registration can go through the 31st. So if you go to an early voting place, at least in North Carolina, you can, if you're not registered, you can still register up until Saturday the 31st at that place. You cannot register on election day. And, and then there's like just some other variables. If you've done mail-in voting, you can track your ballot and you can sign up for that. If you are nervous about mail-in voting, you can find a drop box that's official. You can go to your Board of Elections, all that sort of stuff. And stuff that I knew sort of everyone knows in a way, but I was like, no, I literally, like, this information is in front of me. Like I can, I felt like, just kind of being able to talk about that just in common conversation is not something that we always do. And, I'm probably snoozed by a lot of people on Facebook by now. So they're probably like, oh God, it's her again. She's talking about voting. So yeah, but I think that, and there's still, I mean, everyone's getting those texts. I'm getting I keep getting them and I'm like, hi, I just volunteered for your group. Like, but it's so many people that are trying to do it. And, yes, they're annoying, but the one person that writes back and says, oh my gosh, you know what? I don't know where I can early vote. Boom, you got a voter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that's so for if all of us are going to like hang up and also get these texts and just sort of delete them, or it's also fun if your opposing candidate texts you and you're like, heck no. But if your current one does and you're sort of like, I've already voted, then they're like, thank you. Otherwise, they will send you 1,000,001 links and things to help you. So as much as they're annoying, if you really have a question, text them back and ask them, because there is someone there. That's the thing. Like I look at my phone and I'm like, oh, my phone rang today before my second client, which was at 10. My cell phone rang about 15 times and I was on a call. I couldn't answer it, but I was like, oh my gosh, are these the people? Are these me? Like, are these the people that are doing this? It's possible. But so I know it's annoying and that part will be over soon. So hang in there.
So, Rada, why did you want to get involved? Why did you personally want to come on and say, I want to talk?
So first is because, I really like the way that you set your platform up. When you invite your guest on, there's transparency, there's the ability to have these raw conversations. A lot of people say that's what they want to do, but when it's presented or when, we start to go that way, they flinch, they kind of tighten their butt cheeks up because they're a little nervous about how it might go. And so, you've never come across as a person who was not open to the conversation. So that was honestly, it doesn't matter what you talk about. I've told you that. If you invite me on, I'm going to be on because I know that it's a place to be able to have these conversations, and we do it respectfully, but to have these very hard conversations. The second one is because voting is really important, and I wanted to be on because when you pick the subject matter, because again, for me, and a lot of people who look like me, it comes down to, even if I didn't want to, there's a responsibility that I have to my ancestors. There were a lot of people who protested years ago, were attacked by dogs, fire hoses, things dumped on their heads, died, lynched, you name it, houses burned, just because they wanted to vote. And so this is bigger than me. This is, again, really allowing people to understand I'm here today and I get to vote today because of them. And so that message, even if it only resonates with one person, even if only one person hears the plight of why it's important to vote, whether it's because of immigrants and they're wanting a better life, if it's because of a person in a marginalized community who didn't always have the voice or the capacity to vote, if it is because you're a woman and you don't feel heard, it doesn't matter. The fact that we can vote and we have that right, that's why I wanted to be on here, is to just kind of push and almost be the hype person backing up the work that Andrea is putting in, which is go vote, go vote, vote like if we could be rewarded for voting, I'd want to be rewarded in food. So like when I vote, I always go somewhere and eat afterwards. But and then the third reason I want to be on here is because knowing you, Melissa and Andrea, I want to be on here because this is like low key our way to like kind of get together.
I was totally thinking that too.
And so the fact, and then my fourth reason, because I'm extra. The fourth reason is because most people on Facebook only see me putting jokes out, or they know that side. They don't necessarily know that there's actually like a brain up here. And so I wanted to also kind of come because a lot of times there's different sides to us, and there's different I don't want to say personalities because that sounds not personalities, but just different parts of us. And so this is me adulting. I wanted to come and adult tonight. And so adulting means, again, coming on your platform. And I know you have a really good reach, the ability to get to people, to understand why, maybe even a person that doesn't agree with you or see the same viewpoint, why it's important for us to hear and to understand why some of us are in the space that we are. And that's what it is. So when I just, thank you for the platform. Thank you for the ability to be on here and to talk about a subject that a lot of people, like, Andrea was saying, they're just kind of going at each other and not really trying to do it from a view or standpoint of understanding where the other person's coming from. And this election is different because, again, some people, I'm probably not going to really listen to what they're saying because they're so far in the field of crazy right now. So
there's that line that gets crossed. And
that's it. There's a line that I think is there that's beyond political party. It's now, like I was saying earlier, it's a human thing. It is very much, I'm paying attention to what you claim that you're standing for and how it affects the people that you're leaving out of the group because they don't fit your narrative. And so, that's why.
I only wish, Melissa, that we were in your little cabin with you.
Oh, yeah. You guys are welcome to come down anytime.
I'm like, every time I see pictures, I'm like, I want to go to the cabin.
Anytime. I think a lot of it too, a lot of the reason why I was really excited that you both were on was because you both have girls. I mean, we're all moms to girls, and we want our girls to grow up better than what we've had it, and to still be a major part of society and not marginalized like they're being marginalized right now.
Absolutely.
So
and that's where it starts now. Like you said, the conversation. I think that's what Kate, like when Kate was saying how her kids are involved, and I know Kate. That's why I'm referencing Kate. So hey, Kate. Is because it also has to do with, I think, when as parents, our responsibility isn't necessarily to sway our kids one way or the other. It's to prepare them. Our responsibility as parents is to give our children all the tools that they need to go into the world, to survive, to be, out there and to make an impact, right? A good, positive impact. And so when you do that, you get kids like Kate who are, understanding, she says, hi, understanding the things that, they're facing that will impact them. And so I think that's the other thing when I said, for my girls is having the conversation was less about me telling them who they should vote for or who they should support, but more about pay attention to what they're saying and then go look up their track record, see what they've done in the community, see how, what have they done for people that you feel are marginalized or those that are not heard, because again, there's a lot of subset of communities that don't feel heard, and the only time they are even visibly seen is during an election year. And so we want to make sure we hold our politicians accountable on every level. And that's what I told my daughter. I was like, guess what, you can pick up the phone right now and call your senator. You can pick up the phone and call your congressman or congresswoman. Like you can write letters, you can set up appointments. So that's where we are, is like letting my girls know there is power in who you are, and you can be one person and still make an impact. But imagine if all of us were teaching our kids to make this impact in the world, that one day when we're no longer here, our kids, the legacy that we've tried to put in them, they're living, and then they're teaching their kids. And that's where the real power is when it comes to, again, the bigger picture is the responsibility we have to our kids to teach them to make this world a better place than the way we gave it to them.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's the reason why I wanted to not come on and talk about the political candidates that we're supporting. I just wanted to talk about how important it is to vote, because regardless of who you support, your voice matters.
Yeah.
Even though I think all three of us kind of support the same candidate.
And that's okay. Well, that's the thing. You know what the thing is?
That's another, we got to sit with you on another day.
That's another day.
That's a cabin chat for sure.
Yep.
But like to be able to say, and that's the other part of it, is that, I mean, even when I was making calls, certainly I had a few people be nasty. I had a few people just be like, there's no way I'm voting this, or there's no way my spouse is voting that. And I'm like, okay, sir, ma'am, whomever, I just am here to provide you information to ensure that you know how to vote. And so regardless of what party you do represent when you're calling, it's the legality aspect, and it's the aspect of what you guys were saying before, is that you're not trying to suppress someone's vote. And that is the part where the intimidation is difficult. That is the part where if people are not trained properly, and it's so hard right now with COVID, because who usually runs at the polls? The elderly, like every time you've ever gone in, there's some sweet little old lady there, and so it's like, and that's a risk, of course. And so, and it's just sort of that mindset of saying, you know what, there might be this point where you're, where someone says, oh no, if you don't have this, you can't. And maybe there's not even intent behind it, but when there is, then that's the start that, it turns into. There is also, I don't have that in front of me, but there is, if you see suppression in any way, or if you see something along the lines at a polling place where they are, where they're letting people in with paraphernalia, where they are asking someone or asking you for your ID, and you may clarify, no, I don't need to. And they may eventually accept that. But the fact that they even ask, they're not supposed to. So, and again, depending on what state you're in, but there are places to report to say, look, these people, I understand you guys need polling people, but these people are intimidating. Because I knew, say, as an example, I have a friend that this happened to, not in North Carolina, but I knew that I didn't need ID. So I was able to insist that and say, hey, look, I can show you all the laws. But what about the person that doesn't? What about the person that's coming in, and that's whether it's an 18-year-old or an 85-year-old? What about the person that's coming in and is like, I'm ready to vote, and they're like, where's your ID? Oh, I don't have it. I thought I didn't need it. No, you do. What do they do? And so that person is probably going to do that to someone else. And so that's sort of where, and yes, if I were there and that were happening, I would probably stick my nose in and be like, no, they don't. But there's not always people like that. And then you're always in your little space and you're trying to, so, some people don't have the loud voice, I guess. I don't know, but, but things like that where, it's important to vote, certainly, because it is, like you said, Rada, about sort of, it's essentially instigating change in some ways, but also to be able to advocate for everyone's right to vote in different ways. And so I think that's the other part of it too.
I will say I want to get to Michaela's horn, my middle daughter's horn, a minute. She's actually worked the polls before. She's actually been one of the poll workers. She registered to vote when she was 18. They were looking for, in Wayne County where I'm at, they were looking for people to work the polls, and she worked on election day a couple of times. This is, I think, the first election day that she's not worked because she has all these internships and everything in Greensboro, but she's worked, and people were always applauding her, saying, wow, you're getting involved early, and we love that. So they are always looking for people to work election
I mean,
polls.
probably still, right? Like, like I actually had some clients say that to me. Wait, where are you again in North Carolina? Oh, they're looking in Raleigh and Durham. They're looking for, and I'm like, okay, I know I kind of have to work, but okay. But you know, the same.
So young people, if you're looking for a job, you know, because okay, who is Ace? Somebody says hi, Ace, and the other
me.
Says,
oh my God, it's my aunt and uncle. Hi guys.
Oh, so I got a new name to call you now.
That is the cutest ever. Oh,
now we know Ace.
Washed. Yeah, right? Those are my initials. Those are my maiden initials. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's
that's why my email has that in it.
And then it says hi. Well, I'm so glad that family is tuning in to watch.
Yeah, look at that. That's awesome.
Awesome. And then we have to give Kate the props here because Kate is the one that volunteered pretty much.
I mean, no, it's good.
Yeah.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Guys, I just want to thank you for coming on. I know we've talked a lot for the last, hour and 20 minutes or so, but I think this is important because a week from now, we're going to decide who's going to be our next president.
Right. We'll come back if you need us.
Absolutely.
Maybe a couple of days later, we'll see what happens.
Maybe a couple of days later, we can be talking about certain things, but
let's make that a date with some wine.
That sounds good to me. Because of course you don't want to vote drunk. Okay,
probably not a good idea.
So we're just gonna put that out there, guys. You don't vote while you drink.
You can go drink after, it's totally fine.
And also make sure, I'm just gonna put this out there because it happened in front of us, that you're only voting for one particular person for each office.
Oh goodness, yeah.
There was somebody that was in front of us when we were voting, that actually voted, and his ballot was rejected because he voted for too many people for senator, too many people for president.
Oh gosh, yeah.
He didn't know how to read the ballot.
I think so I vote in Durham, and I think the only thing that was multiple was like judges or something, which sometimes can be, but it will say clearly like you may vote for 5 for this area or whatever. Yeah.
So if you have to, download a sample ballot of wherever you're voting from, because I mean you can go on your voter registration site and download a sample ballot and go through who you want to vote for, and you can even bring that ballot with you.
Yes,
because they will actually pass out ballots for you if you want a ballot while you're walking in.
Oh, and let me say one more thing. If you are voting by mail, please mail that baby in tomorrow at least. It should have, today is like the best possible day. It needs to be postmarked by election day. It can be received after if it's going through, if you bring it right to the post office and they're going to mark it. I think I even wrote it down and I just can't remember exactly how many days. But there's a couple of days after. I don't know if it's the 5th maybe, but at the same time, don't risk it. That's the one part about voting that's the only part of voting by mail that makes me a little bit anxious, is that get it postmarked way before if you can. You can if you're mailing it, obviously you can go to, hold on one second, you can go to vote.org Dropbox locator and find a Dropbox if you don't feel comfortable putting it in the mail. So
that's good to know. I'll have to post that on Facebook too, like tomorrow for people.
I think it's Dropbox locator or something. I'll send you the link, and then if you want to put it, Melissa.
Yeah, I would love to put it in this too, because it would be pretty awesome. I mean,
part where I was like, the mail, you know, like in your head, if you can't get to the post office and you're nervous, just go to either your board of elections or find your drop box and drop the baby in there. It's safe.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And
Thank
just
you for
once
having
again, this conversation is awesome. And
Thank you.
I love each and every one of you. You know that.
Yes, we love you too. And see, look,
Yeah, I talked about it. I almost wore a voter shirt today, but I didn't have one. I was
yeah,
like,
the only stuff I have is paraphernalia. So I was like, but these I have, my friend made them. So yay.
So, guys, once again, I want to thank you. And most importantly, guys, go vote. Regardless of who you're voting for, vote. That's your right as an American citizen. And even as a immigrant who, if you're a citizen, you can vote. So vote.
Yes,
and vote wisely. Vote. Thank you. Do that again, Andrea.
Vote.
Thank you. So I will see you guys on the next chat from the blog cabin. Bye, guys.